All right, let's get going here. Thank you so much for joining our monthly webinar series. I am Sri Chalapa, CEO, co-founder of Engagedly. And today, we are talking about getting most out of your HR tech implementations. Although HR tech is not necessarily unique in terms of implementations for technology adoption, it's probably true for other types of implementations as well. One of the key things about HR implementations is it usually impacts the entire organization. It's not just a single department implementation. I was reading this morning, Jason, that according to one of the research report McKinsey published, only 30% of digital transformation projects result in improved corporate performance, and that's a massive, massive, statistic that you think that 70% of these implementations actually don't provide any corporate performance.
Right.
And 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 a lot of the issues, to be honest, is some of it is obviously related to talent and skills the organization have, but it's also about executive support to these technology initiatives. Even though they may sign the dotted line, are they actually behind it? And a lot of the corporate cultures may not adopt it. Behavior change, right? Even though you want new technology, but when it comes to you using the technology, it may or may not actually adapt. So we'll talk a lot about that. Just a quick background again, I'm the co-founder at Engagedly. We are an HR tech platform in talent management, basically built for employee experience so that we can drive better adoption and build and launch HR platforms that actually employees will use. I'm also pleased to join with me here is Jason. Jason is a superhero when it comes to customer success. I have been working with Jason for about a year or longer, maybe, but I have, he's impressed me beyond my any expectations on his expertise and his knowledge and depth on how to drive user adoption. And he runs his own consulting firm in driving product adoption and success for customers, and he has helped Engagedly in that aspect as well. So thank you so much, Jason, for talking about this important topic that we all could learn from.
Great. Thank you so much, Sri, for having us. It's been great to work with you and your team. As Sri said, I am one of the co-founders of Success Chain. My co-founder is Sunabit Moore, is based in Paris, and she's just a delight. And some of the information you will see today comes from her thought leadership. So with Success Chain, we work with both great companies like Sri to help set up customer success teams, but we also spend a lot of time working with buyers of software to help them drive change and adoption in their organization, to make sure that they actually don't fall into that 70% trap of transformation failure. So today I wanted to share some of the insights that we've developed working with both vendors and buyers of software to really help you guys learn some actionable practical tips that will help you achieve greater success with your HR IT implementations. So I'm going to go through, we've got quite a bit of content. We'll go through pretty quickly, and there'll be questions at the end if you would like to ask some. And I'm inviting Sri to jump in and share his insights and perspective as we go through. So let's get started. The first thing here is our agenda. We're going to spend a little bit of time up front setting the stage for business goals and ROI from tech investment and why people invest in HR tech or any tech. And then what are some of the reasons why adoption and change are so key to success here, and some of the reasons to focus on that. And we'll talk a little bit about what people get wrong and some ways that you guys can shift your focus and your energy and your actions to drive more success. And then we'll walk through a 6-step process for adoption, and then close out on a couple ideas of getting started, including some areas where if you need additional help, we're happy to assist you. So let's jump in. With the first part here about business goals and ROI for HR tech investments. And what I like to start with is to really just asking, why do people and organizations invest in tech? And ultimately, it comes down to some expectation of, we'll have improved organization performance, we'll solve a problem, we'll increase efficiency, we'll increase effectiveness, we'll achieve our strategic goals, whatever they may be. But there's some problem or pain in our organization that we believe tech will solve. And the underlying assumption behind all of this is that by investing in tech, and all that it takes to get it live and used, which is considerable efforts usually, that really will achieve greater results than if we did nothing. And we have an expectation that there'll be a return on investment to justify all the cost, time, effort, and pain. And what really people think about is technology is a great enabler of improved performance. It allows new ways of collaboration. We can automate work and reduce manual steps that have to happen. We can improve processes and insights, but it's just an enabler. What we need to remember is having the functionality available to us does not guarantee the outcomes, and it doesn't guarantee that anyone will use it. And we need to get people to change how they view their job and what it means to be good at their job. We need to get them to change how they do their job to take advantage of these new tech capabilities in order to get the results that we want. And as you often like to say, if you have no adoption, you have no value. And this is really just critical to keep in mind, that having the tech possibilities is great, but you need to drive the adoption too to get the outcomes that you want. So oftentimes buyers of software have inflated expectations about what it takes to get results that they want, and really what they should expect realistically. And as we heard from Shree's example of only 30% of those transformation efforts are successful, here are some questions that you should ask yourself in your organization. Look at your typical software product that you've purchased. It could be a CRM, it could be a finance system, it could be anything at all. And really say, what is the typical adoption rate that we get here? How many of our users, what percent are typically using the system to its full effect and full adoption? Out of our systems, how many of those do we think are really delivering the full potential and full value? And also, how much ROI and how much value do you think we get from most software purchases? And if you seem to realize a growing trend here, that when we look across the other portfolio of tech investments that we get, we really are not getting the full value out of them, then when you go to buy your HR tech, regardless of which system you go for, you should be skeptical about your organization's ability to get full value from it. And based on that, take actions accordingly. We had one client, very large organization, that was making a massive multi-million-dollar investment in tech. And they said, we probably get about 10% of the value out of our tech investments for every dollar we spend. And when you're spending millions of dollars, that's a very concerning statistic. So let me walk you through a very easy conceptual way to really articulate the need and the impact of user adoption. And I encourage all organizations to go through and share this internally, this very quick ROI chart. I've shared this on the back of a napkin. I've shared it in corporate boardrooms, and every time it gets head nod. So if you're trying to build some support for why you need to focus on adoption, this is an easy way to do it. So when you look at a timeline here of your investment dollars and your return on investment, at the beginning of a project, you really haven't spent anything, and you have this assumption that in the future through tech, we will get some great value and we'll have this incredible return on investment. And in a perfect world, we'd go right there. But it's not a perfect world. It's very complex, and getting technology implemented and adopted is very challenging. And the reality is, most organizations, they spend a lot of time up front doing their vendor selection, checking references, getting requirements, going through the whole implementation process, cleaning data, transitioning systems, training people, and eventually they go live. And many times they just sort of stop their efforts there, or they really don't know what to do next. And most organizations, when you first go live, all you've really done is maximize your sunk cost, or at least you hope you have. Some organizations continue to have additional costs beyond.
Well, Jason, one thing I would like to add, because I came from a technology services background and probably been part of over, I don't know, at least 100 implementations across multiple clients. And when you say, was this project a success? And they say, yeah, we went live.
Yep.
I think that's what you're talking about here. Going live is not success. Success is, are people using it? Are you getting the process improvements that you outlined? Are you getting the business outcomes that you outlined, the ROI, maybe cost reduction, revenue increase, lower turnover, lower, retention issues, whatever that is, higher employee satisfaction. Some of them may be quantifiable, some of them are evidence-based that you can get from your own research. So I just wanted to highlight that point, because it is something that not to be missed. Because when you ask a lot of organizations, did you get, yeah, this project was successful, we went live just on time, it was under budget, and there were no production issues, so this project is success. Well, is it?
It's funny you mentioned that, because we had that same conversation with multiple departments of a client organization. And when we asked the executives, when you ask business users, that never came out we went live on time or on budget. When you asked IT, on time and on budget was the metric they were held accountable for. So it also depended on where you were. And that sort of highlighted for them that they did not have the internal alignment across business goals versus IT goals. And it was really insightful. But that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that in. So anyway, coming back to this point, when you go live, most organizations, you've maximized your sunk costs. But the reality is there's still this cost recovery curve you need to come up to before you even break even on your investment. And this can take time as you get a small group of users to use the system, and then eventually another team, another department, and you build up to the enterprise-wide adoption or the target user-wide, because if it's not an enterprise system, one or two users probably won't get you there, but as you start to build populations of users all working collectively and effectively, that's when you start to break even. Most organizations, if they break even, and not all of them do, it will happen much farther in the future than they expect to happen. And then as you continue on, you'll achieve success, and you'll actually achieve your ROI goals, and this too can be farther in the future. One other thing I do like to highlight here, this chart is sort of a point in time snapshot of, okay, we've achieved our success, but what are the guarantees that 3, 5, and 10 years down the road, we will maintain that success? Because it's very easy, just like the investment in your portfolio and your retirement accounts, you may be up one year, but down the next if people stop using your tech investment or you stop paying attention to it. So success is not guaranteed in the future just because you achieve it at one point. So this simple chart right here is pretty easy to understand. And as you talk to users and business folks about where you are on this process and where you're trying to get to, drawing this out gives them a simple visual to understand. But it also begs the question, why do so many organizations focus their efforts here on the upfront cost and technical efforts to go live and stop there, instead of focusing their efforts on what happens after go live, where all the value is created? And so I encourage every organization out there, especially for your HR tech, shift your focus to how are we going to make sure we quickly come up that cost recovery, and how do we make sure we get the outcomes that we need in the ROI 3, 5, 10 years in the future. And when you look at that and say, well, what do most organizations typically do to deploy this? Folks have some common knowledge here. They say, we'll do a little change management, or as I call it, traditional change management, typically focused on go live. And this is typically a lot of selling staff on what's in it for me and the latest and greatest, and trying to communicate how wonderful the tech will make their life. We're going to train them and then sort of forget about it and move on. And then, as I call it, the go live and go home approach. I too have been an implementation consultant, worked on many projects, and typically it was, all right, we're live, we're done. And when you look at that approach, you say, well, what are the typical results? And usually your data is not always accurate and relevant. So all the insights and value and automations you thought would get triggered don't work. You start to blame the end users, and it's a resistance issue. Sorry about that, my video went off. And then as you go forward a little bit more, you start to see that it's low limited adoption, low value all the way through. So the whole point here is, if you're taking that just traditional change management approach, just focus on initial go live, you should lower your expectations about what your outcomes are going to be. So why do we focus on adoption and behavior change? As Shri started to mention, and Shri, jump in here if you have any additional insights or thoughts, the amount of IT failures as a result of adoption are huge. And as you can see in the first one, 70% of projects are really caused due to some version of adoption issues in there. And you can go through and see a lot of functionality is not paid for, or that is paid for is not used. That's 47%. If you are buying an enterprise system that has package licensing, that may not be such a big deal. If you get the functionality and value that you need without using it all. But if you're paying a la carte for functionality, or you really need this functionality to be used, that's a big issue. And then I had 50%, but I think Shri, you had a higher number of 70% that adoption.
Yeah, I was just quoting a McKinsey report, so it's for what it's worth. But yeah. I was, and there was another report that said 90%. So I'm like, okay, well, that can be clearly be right. But one thing, like you said, adoption is important because it's not a technology problem.
Right.
In some cases, it might be you might have made a bad selection on technology. The technology had maybe glitches, and your use cases may not have matched the right technology. But more often than not, that's a very minority of those issues. Most of the issues is about people, and people are not software.
Yeah.
You can't just program them and say, here, I use it. So we talk about that, right, Jason, on how do we actually do that?
Absolutely. And also I want to highlight here, I'm glad you brought this up, as we talk about adoption, you don't worry about adoption for its own sake. You worry about it because it's on the critical path to achieving those business outcomes that you want. And if you don't have the adoption, it will prevent you from getting the outcomes. It's the outcomes that you actually want. So I like to ask, why do some organizations succeed while others fail? And if you look at, let's say you look across a software vendor's portfolio of customers, they will have some customers that are great value and great adoption and doing wonderful and swear by the system. And those are the ones that give out the great references. But then they have others who really don't get as far as they had expected. And I point out that regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, the technology and the functionality is the same across a vendor's application. You might make some tweaks in terms of what you turn on and turn off, but the technology is pretty constant, and its functionality is there for all user organizations. But what is different, and the variable here, are the people and the actions that they take are very different from one organization to the next. And that's the area where usually success or failure comes in, and that's where you need to be focusing. So success really does require you to focus on the people, behaviors, and change in your organization. And what's really important here as well, too, is that this is within your own organization. This is not a software problem. This is an internal problem, an internal challenge. And only you as the buyers of software are the people who are able to address this and prevent problems from happening. Any thoughts on that, Sri?
No.
Okay. So very quickly, what do we mean by user behavior? As you can see in this image, you can design things to work a certain way, but people are going to go sort of their own path as we go forward to it. And when I think about user behavior, I think of it as the observable day-to-day actions that people are taking when performing their job. Looking at the way, are they using the system as it's designed and intended? Are they using it on time and putting stuff in there timely and accurately so that other people in the organization can benefit? Are they using the system in such a way that enables others to use the system to perform their jobs? And when you realize, especially across so many enterprise systems here, it's no longer just how well you do your job that matters, but also how you do your job that matters, because how you do your job using tech has huge implications for how everyone else in the organization can do theirs, as well as for the organization to achieve their outcomes. So really think about that. So, having harped on this quite a bit of how do you change, what is behavior change, and behavior is so important? How do you change someone else's behavior? And I ask this question all the time, and I got a wide range of answers here. And the short answer that I like is quite simply, you don't. You can't directly change someone else's behavior. You can only change your own behavior and the environment. And that's really powerful, I think, when you understand that. Only the individual, your end users, your staff, your partners, your customers, whoever's supposed to be coming into your system through whatever venue, only they can change their own actions. But you can change as a leader or as a manager or an end user. How do you change your own behavior to help drive desired actions in others? And then also the environment. And by the environment, I mean, what are the processes? What are the incentives? What are the structures that you have in place there? What are the rewards, whether it's for an individual, team, or the organization? Those are all things that you can affect and can adjust the knobs on sort of the tuning dials to get people where they want to be. One of the things I do hear all the time, and Sri maybe you've encountered this too, the myth that they will have no choice but to use the system. I assure you, there are all kinds of ways to game the system, and to whether
Right.
work to someone else.
Exactly, because they could be misusing the system, and now you actually have counterproductive information that could actually lead you down a different path, right?
Yep, absolutely. And there's so many areas, but whenever I hear someone say they'll have no choice, and I go through a bunch of questions, and suddenly they have the aha, oh, there's a lot of choice, a lot of degrees of freedom of behavior. But I do want to end on a positive note. I think most people want to do the right thing, and they're willing to change their behavior. But pretty much in every organization I've gone into, I've always found at least one barrier to adoption that prevents people from using the system as designed, even if they want to. And there's not always an escalation path where they can identify this barrier and move it up to the people with the power to change it. So then they sort of move on with things and do their own. So many times people want to do it, but they can't.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying the saying that beatings will continue till morale improves doesn't work?
Funny enough, you would think it would, but that is exactly the challenge here. So let's jump into some proven tactics and a 6-step process for adoption here. Before we get into the 6 steps, though, I wanted to think about modern software changes so fast. Releases come out sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly. It's constantly evolving and improving and where it needs to go. But this does mean that there's less time compared to the old way where there was several months run up to implement a system. Now it can be instantaneous. there's less time for change efforts and expectation setting efforts prior to go live. So you need to spend more time after go live. And also, as many organizations have, these constant releases and agile development, it's gone from a one point in time, like, oh, we went live, that's the old way to the new way, to we're changing every day, and really change the learning curve into a learning treadmill. And you need to make sure that you are prepared to handle this. And this means you need to have an infrastructure to manage this ongoing adoption, ongoing change. You may need some different skills and structures in there. You may need some different methodologies to say, are we getting the full value? Is this still working as we need it to be? So these are some big implications for folks that are very used to that traditional change management of, boop, we turned it on, and then a year and a half later, half your staff has turned over and the functionality has changed so much that you're no longer getting value. You need to keep up with the systems. So the 6 steps that I've used internally with many organizations to drive adoption that have been very effective, and we'll go through these, is define success, assign the owner, who's going to be the champion responsible for achieving those outcomes and those business results. Analyze your organization. This is an organizational assessment to really figure out what are those drivers and barriers to adoption. Come up with a plan to quickly get those initial quick wins and move forward, and then sustain adoption over time, and then execute your plan. And the important thing here is to continue to evolve and evaluate your program, what's working, what's not, what has changed in the system, what's changed in your organization, and move it forward. So we'll jump right in here. This define success, a success chain, we use the AMPM method, which I'm, all credit to my business partner, Sue Navitt-Moore. She is the pioneer behind this, and it's really worked very well for most organizations that have adopted it. And really the start of this is, what are the performance metrics? What are those business outcomes that you are trying to achieve at an organizational level that is justified investing in technology, regardless of who the vendor is? And how will you know if you've achieved success? And these are lagging indicators, because you still have to implement the software, get people to use it, come up that adoption curve to achieve those ROI goals. So really, these are the, okay, a year from now, we will know that we will successful because we've hit these numbers. And then based on those performance metrics or PM metrics, come back and derive related adoption metrics or activity metrics, depending how you think of these. And these are really at that end user level, at the manager level, at the department level. What are the stats that you can look at that say that we're using the system as we need to? So because of this, we're on the trajectory to achieve those business outcomes. And these are really leading indicators. So these are ones you can look at every single day or in real time. And there's probably some reporting in your system out there to go through and say, are we getting the usage and is it effective the way we want it to be? And I encourage people to really be explicit in defining these, because you're going to want to communicate these out to all of your end users, all of your managers. These are the changes in performance expectations that you have for them. So instead of moving what's in it for me, it's going to be so great for you. Now you can also articulate, and here's what success looks like for you as an individual performer and contributor now, and here's our performance expectations for you. And I do say there's kindness and clarity here. So a very effective template that we recommend, and the team at Engagely has this template and can work with you to build out your AM/PM template. Start with your performance metric. I recommend come up with 2, maybe 3 business outcomes that you're trying to achieve over a defined timeline. Write down how you're going to measure these and what's the baseline value that you get today, whether it's hours, whether it's a satisfaction score, if it's something else. And then based on what you're hoping to achieve, map out what do those numbers need to look like from a scoring perspective, 30, 90, 180, 360 days from here, and write down those target goals. Now, what you need to do then is, since you have these targets and you're very articulate, you need to make sure that someone is coming back at those same intervals to take the actual metrics and identify, are we on track or off track, and take action accordingly. So that's the performance metrics. And then as we go down, here's some related activity metrics that you would derive based on those performance metrics. And you may have 2 to 3 performance metrics. You might have 3 or 4 activity metrics or adoption metrics here, but the same process combines. These are the types of things that you want to be able to say to a manager and end user. Have you checked the box that you have completed this? Are you doing what is asked? And as I often say, if you can make these checklists ready so that you can say to someone, did you do this, every Friday by 5 p.m., then you're in good shape. But again, you see here, we've got metrics for 30, 90, 180, 360 days. And you need to go through and come back and have a process to measure those and make sure you're on track to achieve those. If you do this, and if you do this well in your organization, you'll have great results. We've worked with many organizations to help them do it, and it's very impactful, and it's a very clear and easy to understand way to go. Shri, anything you want to jump in about?
Yeah, so these metrics are not written in stone, right? So these are just examples. This is what we use at Engagedly because we are focused on talent management, which is around performance, engagement, learning and development. So each HR tech implementation or any implementation will have to take that into consideration. But having this AM/PM metrics is very important because what I've seen in many implementations or many outcomes that people are looking at, they focus a lot on AM implementations, right? Did the project go live on time? Did the technology have no glitches? Was the new process launched on time? Was the training completed? Yeah, but did the people learn?
Right.
Are our children learning? Right? You
Exactly.
know, so so that's the activity metric, and then there's the outcome metric. Are people using the system, and are you seeing a reduction in process time? Are you seeing an improvement in employee satisfaction or customer satisfaction or whatever that metric is? And those are measurable. You can run a survey, you can do a poll to get those data points. You can look at data points like these. Are we finishing our comp? Let's say you're working your performance management cycle and your comp cycle, and it's been taking you 3 months to do it, and which is not unusual in many organizations. Can you now crunch that down into 3 weeks? Are you able to do that? And it's a huge saving, right? If you extrapolate that over several thousand employees and hundreds of managers and leaders, that's a massive ROI on being able to save an additional 6 weeks on that. So those are some of the outcome metrics. And I think it's important to have both because without activity metrics, you'll actually not have outcome metrics either. But activity metrics by alone is not, you know, doesn't define success. So thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we sort of touching on it a little bit here. So you need to generate the metrics, but then someone's got to be accountable and responsible for analyzing those and taking action based on those. If you are off your activity metrics, your adoption metrics, you can be pretty confident you're not going to hit your performance measurements because again, no adoption, no value. But these are also things that now you can communicate this out to your team weekly, monthly, quarterly. Here's where we are. We're not hitting our targets. So people have that feedback loop that is so critical to achieving success. They know what's expected of, and they can be proud of. Hey, I did what's asked from me. So I really highly recommend those. And again, many thanks to Sue for her leadership on putting those together. So the next step is assign an owner. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to organizations and I just ask the question, who is it that at the senior level is accountable for making sure that you get adoption in the ROI from your tech investment and over what time period? Typically crickets. Usually they don't have a single person and they haven't thought about that. So if you don't have someone who's going to be held accountable for that, who has a compelling reason to champion that, it's not going to happen. So I really encourage you to do that. They may need it, depending on the size and complexity of the organization, they may need a team, not say a full-time team, but people who can help out and assist with it. Someone who can gather those metrics from across the organization, consolidate them up. Someone who can help be the focal point for, hey, we have a barrier to adoption that's holding everyone back. We need to address these. And many times what you'll find, depending on the system, especially like in CRMs, but enterprise systems, there may be some areas where people upstream like sales or marketing didn't put data in that we need. So now the service team or the finance team can't do their job. And there was a process gap there. So you need someone who's going to be able to really look at those issues and drive the collaboration that you need. So this person, the owner, will really define those reporting success measurement process and making sure that the communication process to feedback is there and taking proactive and reactive action to achieve those results. And again, over the life of the system, folks ask me all the time, well, when should we stop worrying about adoption? And my response is typically, well, when do you want to stop getting value from your IT investment? It has to be over the life of the system. And then the next step, as we mentioned, is conducting an adoption assessment to identify what's going to prevent people from using the system. And I've seen all kinds of things from workload is we have so many things on our plate, this is not a priority, we can't get this done, to in one organization, they were doing a big $40+ million investment of a complex technical system. And it turns out by just simply asking the question, well, what else needs to happen for you to be able to use the system as designed in day one department alone had 30,000 lines of custom code they need to rewrite, and no one had identified it. So you never know what the barrier will be, but they can be significant. But also as part of this assessment, look at how you achieve those quick wins and really where to go quickly. What's going to get people comfortable using the system and being able to say, oh, this is a little bit better. It saved me a bit of time. It was easier than I thought it would be, those sort of things. And And then also, as you go forward, as you're rolling out new functionality or expanding to a new group of users, you need to figure out what it is you can do to drive their adoption and see where they need to be.
Yeah. Can I just emphasize a couple of things here as you're saying through this, and just from our own,
Yeah.
close to 1,000 implementations now that we've done on Engagely. So one of the big ones to talk about the adoption, right, is the executive buy-in. So if you have a buy-in from, let's say, the HR team and maybe even the CEO or the COO, but the marketing and sales team has not really signed up on it. They just showed up and
Yep.
and phoned it in those meetings. And you need to sense that, because if you don't have a big chunk of an influential group, or maybe it's finance group, not to throw sales and marketing under the bus, but or whatever the operations group is. So you need to make sure that the leadership across all those levels are committing, even if some of them may not necessarily agree, right? Some of them might say, hey, there's no value in my salespeople spending time on HR processes. They need to be going out selling. Like, can't disagree with that statement, but there needs to be a commitment that, hey, we are doing this as an organization. So that is important to have that, buy-in, and HR is the facilitator of that process with support from their CEO or COO or whoever that leadership is. The second part is about quick wins. Quick wins is extremely important because success begets success, right? If you try to go big first time, it's going to be very challenging to have a successful long-term implementation and adoption, because that's when the finger pointing will start. Hey, I told you this was not going to work, right? And so in HR, it's very typical, when somebody does a full HR tech overhaul, they might get a new payroll system, a new core HR, a new performance, new learning management, new platform for engagement surveys. That's an 12 to 18 month process. You can't expect to go live with all of that in 6 months or 3 months, or even shorter in some cases. So when we talk about our implementations, let's do some of the ones that are quicker and easier, but not necessarily the hardest, or maybe not that may not have the highest ROI for what you spent in purchasing the platform, but shows progress that you can use it as a calling card to prove the success of the platform and get the buy-in over time. And I just wanted to emphasize that, because we see that those two problems repeat over and over again in many organizations.
Absolutely. And also I'd call out too, the questions that you ask during this assessment will influence the results that you get. And if you just ask some of the bog standard questions, you might miss something that are very detrimental to your organization. So even examples real quick, I worked with one organization where, as we're getting ready to plan for this, a lot of the intended user base of a very complex system had been there for many years. We're not very IT literate. And one of them asked the question, what's a mouse? Another one didn't know how to minimize a window. And if these are the people that you're expecting to use a complex system, or even not a complex system, but it's a big shift for them personally, there's going to be a lot of delays and pushback. Another organization I worked for in the HR department, they had people who had been there as recruiters for many years. This is at a government organization, who knew the hiring process and the people and the organization like the back of their hat, but they were getting a new system. They also had some people who'd been there 1 or 2 years out of school, younger folks, very IT savvy and literate. And it was a big shift of power and prestige in the organization, of rolling out this new system. And there was potential there for one group to feel like they were being persecuted, another group to feel like, oh, I know the tech, but I don't know the organization, the other things. And finding creative ways to marry them up to make sure both groups was successful was very key. But things like that, the cultural issues, the interpersonal issues, understanding the user base are all very critical. And it's not just about how do we train people on this kind of thing. So then obviously next step is to go, based on your assessment, build your plan. What's the technology? What's the time frame? What's the functionality we're rolling out first? Where do we need to go first? Where do we go second? And I also encourage people to look at breaking up what can you do before go live, at go live. And by at go live, I sometimes even mean like for that first 9 to 12 months after the initial switch is flipped, and then after go live, that long-term 3 to 5 years, and figure out what are the actions and plans you can do there. If you're doing a large organization or you're doing a phased rollout, many times there are a lot of things you can do to facilitate the change process before the system is even live. You can decouple some new metrics and performance metrics. You can sometimes tweak your process even though the capability hasn't kept up yet. So there's a lot of things that can be done to make it easier. And part of the goal here is that if you're doing a big organizational transformation, the new technology tools are only one small part of the story, a small part of the process. The tech capabilities come in here, but this is the context of the overall transformation that we're going for. The other two things I think are really important here is really, as we talk about looking at the ability and motivation, ability is not just skill and knowledge, but also organizational factors that may prevent people from using the system that restrict their ability. And motivation can be incentives, can be rewards, can be encouragement. What is it relative to those individuals that want to go there? And then really, how are you going to sustain this over the long term? It sounds pretty easy to put together an effective adoption plan. Many people I've seen try and they make some very terrible mistakes. So I really encourage people to think about how will you drive adoption, sustain it 3 to 5 years in the future? And what activities and milestones do you need to put in there? And how do you plan for unknown future needs? Because you need to get to the point that you can actually forecast the level of effort, the skills, and the resources that you're going to need to drive and sustain this adoption over the long term. And if you can't do that with confidence, you probably need some outside help to figure out what this needs to look like. And then, as I say, try to be specific here. Many times people will get very hazy about what this needs to look like, and they kind of, we'll figure it out down the road, and then they don't, and things go off the rails. So really have some confidence in your plan. And what I often offer up to a lot of folks is, if in the absence of clear information about what's going to happen 3 to 5 years down the road, what you can plan for is, when do we need to update our AM and PM metrics? What are the staffing requirements we're going to have to do to coordinate performance of where we need to go? What are the meetings we're going to need to have to do lessons learned to make sure we're still on track? What's the general structure and process we're going to need to onboard new employees or new users? There are a lot of those questions that you can think through and plan for in advance. And then finally, the last piece is go ahead and execute your program here. Begin before your change. Begin your change and adoption effort prior to go live. We had one organization that brought us in to help plan their change and adoption program 6 months before they even selected their vendor. It was a very large organization, very complex need, and they recognize adoption is going to be critical. You should plan that during the initial launch, there will be more upfront effort required, but things will settle down a little bit more after you go live and down the road, but you will still need some effort to have that ongoing execution. The third bullet here that's very important is, most people don't realize the single biggest driver of adoption and performance of a system is the immediate supervisor of the end users. They are the ones who do the evaluations for their employees. They're the ones who set the goals, who drive all the actions, who let things go or don't, and set the priorities. If you are not engaging your supervisors and preparing them for their role in driving adoption, giving them targets to hit, they don't know what they need to do. And they're the biggest influence out there. I won't go into detail about this. I've written several blogs, but be very careful about the "what's in it for me" message. Many times there's a whole host of reasons why that alone is insufficient. People need to understand the benefits of the new thing for them. But more importantly, they need to understand what are the performance expectations that are now on them as a result of having these new tools, these new tech, these new enablers of their success. So, the message I prefer is, what made you successful yesterday no longer applies. Here's what makes you successful today, and here's how long you have to transition there. And here's how we'll support you in that journey. Very different than trying to sell people on what's in it for me. And then the final piece is, if you are experiencing low user adoption and you've done the things, and you've got the team, you've got the structure, and you're measuring the results, and whether it's a team or a department are not performing well, and not achieving their goals, at some point, don't treat this as resistance, but treat this as a job performance problem. There's a performance expectation for using tools and technology as intended and as mapped out that needs to be there. And if people are not hitting that, I recommend treating that like you would any other area where people are not performing well in their job, and whatever corrective action plans you might have in your organization, go through that process. Sri, any thoughts or anything else you want to jump in here?
I like the "what's in it for me" thing. It is an important question, but if you think about it, it is something that you can't always answer it positively for each employee. Right. When I think about the whole process around performance review, right? Nobody really likes to do a performance review for themselves. It's one of the most stressful events for a lot of employees. So it's hard to say you have to do performance review and they have to say what's in it for me. That question is more organizational at that point, things of this nature. So, or why should I log my time? Right? I'm getting paid a salary. Why should I log my time? There's nothing in it for me. But it is an organizational issue that I want to understand how much you are spending on what activity so that we can optimize the work.
Right. Absolutely. A thing too with what's in it for me is one, many times it falls down based on the credibility of the person who's actually sharing that message. So that's one challenge for many organizations. But when I put myself in the user and the employee hat, instead of what's in it for me, usually what they start to hear is, what am I in for? And they have a much different perspective of this is not going to be all sunshine and roses.
Yeah, I think that's where the why comes into play, right? Why do I need to log time every week on Friday? If you're a developer and you have to log time on different projects you worked on, they're going to get paid for the week or the month regardless. And that's like an administrative task. They'd rather be working on, coding and design. But the person communicating why you need to log those things so that we know how much time we are spending in our engineering team, for example, on writing new code versus designing a code versus debugging the code versus go live support or whatever that different phases are, so that we can optimize the entire development R&D process and engineering team's process. And that you can extrapolate that for any function in the organization, to be honest, right? That level of clarity of why it's important, I think you get a lot of buy-in. Instead of just saying, no, it doesn't matter, you're supposed to do it. If you don't do it, you're not going to get paid bonus next month.
Right. I think you're right. And so many times I've seen people going down that road. It's the system's going to make your job so much easier. It'll save you so much time. Well, people say, oh, it's going to save you so much time. The question automatically becomes, oh, is this time I get to go and spend on myself and on my family and doing fun things? Or is this time that I now have to do other work that I may not want to do? So there's all kinds of implications for how you messaging, and messaging is very important, but also listening to your employees is equally important. And many organizations struggle with that. And then the final step is the learn and evolve. So basically what works today for an adoption program in your organization and where you need to be may not be the right thing a few years down the road. I recommend conducting regular internal adoption usage review meetings. We've done this with many clients. It's been very powerful. Some clients, they've had great, as they come back and just take even a couple hours to sit down and look across the organization of what's working, what's not. One, they've identified areas for great benefits in other parts that they hadn't thought about before. Other areas, many organizations in particular, they found that a lot of their adoption problems had nothing to do with the technology whatsoever. Everyone's saying the tech is this, the tech is that, and no, processes were changing. And if you weren't in the room during a certain discussion or a meeting, you didn't hear about the change, so it didn't move forward. And I remember doing one of these with the vendor and the end users and the integrator and the IT department, and all of them came out amazed because they thought it was all about the system, and they realized the challenges that they had, 95% were just organizational leadership challenges. But it was only through that process of stopping and learning and reflecting on what's working and talking to people that they figure this out. But in this process, you'll learn a lot of things about what's working in the system and where you get more value, how to improve adoption going forward. And also, I recommend updating your AM/PM metrics at least once a year. As your organization sets new strategic goals or business objectives as part of their annual planning, or if it's a 5-year planning, those should trickle down into changes of PM and AM goals here. Two other things I think are really important. As a buyer of software, as you're updating your goals and you're setting what's important, share this with your vendors, share them with their customer success team or your account manager, or whoever's the right contact point for you, because they may have ways to help you achieve your business goals that you don't know about, or ways that you can get even more value. And they want you to get as much value as possible, so you'll continue to partner with them. They are very incentivized to make you achieve these outcomes that you're looking for. And the other piece to keep in mind is most vendors out there, they have customer success teams and onboarding programs and staff and tools that they have, and they're building things to make it easier for you. They need the feedback of where to go first, what's going to have the biggest bang and priority. So your vendor loves the feedback of, this is what's working for us, or here's where we really struggle, asking them if there's things they can do to help, or resources or process changes they could do. So really, this is a chance to be closer with your vendor. I know the good folks at Engagely have put a lot of effort into this, and not every vendor does. So I think you should really take a look at that. So then finally, just coming back to put it all together, when you look at this ROI chart and where you need to be, here's how the steps sort of connect here. Right up front, as you're starting early in the process and looking at tech, what is this success and who's going to be accountable for achieving it? And if you can even articulate to our vendors during the process, here are the business outcomes we're trying to achieve and not just the functionality we're looking for, that goes a long way to letting them tell you and show you how you get there. Plan your program early on, build in your program and go forward. And as you go live, really figure out how you're going to accelerate that adoption and keep it going. So again, just bringing it all together here. There's a lot you can be doing, but it does require you to focus on what happens after go live. So then real quick to get started here, what should you begin building your adoption plan before you even select a vendor. Start to look at, your organization and the features and screens, across many vendors. As you get into a competitive vendor selection, they will have similar capabilities. The look and feel may be different, but for the core things that you're looking for, it will impact your organization in many similar ways. So really start to think about that. In fact, I'd even go forward, if you have some of your ideas and thoughts together, share them with prospective vendors and ask them how they can help make you successful in this journey. Look at the tools that they have, look at the content they have to help make you successful, look at their process and their customer success capabilities. And frankly, that's where I think you'll find a lot of vendors are going to be very competitive in the future as they're building out these capabilities. And then really look at the level of adoption. The amount of effort required will change based on your organization, the complexity of the system and the processes that you go through, the degree of change. If you're doing a small system that's just used by 1 or 2 people, that probably won't require as big an effort as an enterprise system or folks with hundreds or thousands of people across multiple locations. There will be different levels there to go forward. And then the big thing too is make sure you have the right plan, skills, and approach to avoid the costly mistakes. You're investing in technology, but you need to invest in your change and adoption efforts too, or you will not achieve success. Sri, any other things you would throw in here for getting started?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing to think about is the risk is a function of the size of the system, the number of people it impacts, the diversity of the people it impacts, the complexity of the process. So there are multiple factors in play, which is why, one of the things that you mentioned, getting quick wins, starting small in some of those implementations, and then also clearly defining those risks and putting together a adoption plan, getting the buy-in, all of those things are very important. I mean, a lot of them are like standard PMP approaches that we talk about, risk mitigation plan, change management plan, and your communication plan. Those are all part of the standard PMP metrics. A lot of those things are, some of them have been forgotten because of the agile approach we've been taking, but they're still relevant. You don't necessarily need to spend 2 years doing that, but those pieces are still relevant when you do that. And then I think working with a vendor and getting their insight into it, if a vendor, us or anyone else for the matter, has done hundreds of thousands of implementations, they know what has worked, what doesn't, so don't let your ego get in the way of, I know better. And you may know better, but it's important to at least get that input to assess how you can be more successful.
Absolutely. I think that's a good point too, because having worked with a lot of customer success teams as well too, and you talk with them, usually after the first couple of meetings with a new or current client, the CSM or the account manager, they have a pretty good idea of if that client is on the right path to long-term success, or if they're letting things slip through the cracks or not going to achieve the results that they want. And many times the CSM will bring it up to the vendor, do their best, but sometimes it falls on deaf ears. Sometimes they don't fully understand it. But I think usually if you have a close and candid relationship with your CSM and say, how are we looking so far? Do you think we're on track? What else can we be doing? Your CSM will probably help you. And I think also as you go forward and you get started here and you start to look at adoption levels, one, if you see they're a little bit low, proactively go to your CSM and say, hey, what else should we be doing? We're not quite getting where we are. The devil's in the detail, but your CSM should have some ideas there, because it's in everyone's best interest for you to be successful. Okay. And then finally, folks, just wanted to offer up, I know that some organizations really struggle with this. Success Chain can help. We do half of our business is working with buyers of software. A couple of specific things that we can help with. If you are planning an HR IT implementation or any IT implementation, we can actually come in and help you set up your quick start adoption value plan. Look at some of these assessment areas and figure out what are the goals you need to do and help you build a robust and effective adoption plan that you can then go and execute. But really make sure that you're set up from the very beginning to be successful with your organization. Depending on the size of the organization, this is just a few days worth of work, where others are maybe a couple of weeks for larger, more complex organizations. But to get you a solid plan that you can realistically go for and forecast your time and expenses and where you think you'll get value, we can help with that. And then finally, once you have your plan for organizations that need more help executing it, some organizations, they say, hey, we've got some people in here, but they've not really done this before. Can you give us some coaching, some training, or just let us be someone that we can call when we have questions to make sure that we don't step on any landmines? In other organizations, especially the larger ones, many times like, we know this is important. We're very complex and large organizations. We just don't have either the skills in-house or we don't have the capacity. We have the skilled people, but they're on other projects. Can you give us some help here? And we're very happy to assist those as well too. So if that is something of value to you, please give us a shout. We'd love to get and have a quick call with you and see how we can help. And with that, if that's pretty much what we had to go over today. We know we threw a lot at you, but you have other questions, please give me a call, reach out to me. My email is there, LinkedIn, successchain.net. We'd love to have a conversation. And I think we only have a couple of minutes left, but if there are any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. If not, we can wind up there.
Yeah, the chat has been disabled for some reason, and I couldn't figure out how to fix it. So if you guys have questions, please put it in the Q&A section of the Zoom chat, and we can try to answer them.
Yeah, great. So, and this is one of those, I think a lot of folks, if this is some new information for them, they stop and think about it a little bit later, like, oh, I wish I'd thought of that. I should have asked it on the presentation. If that's the case, feel free to reach out to us after the fact, and we're happy to answer your questions as you go forward there.
Yeah. The one thing I will say that, I came from a long history of IT implementations back when I was with EY and Capgemini for 9 years, and then another 9 years with other IT services. And I'll tell you, the 90% or more of IT technology projects did fail in their original promise. It didn't mean they failed completely. I mean, they failed to the original promise. They almost always were behind budget, behind time, over budget.
Yep.
A fraction of the stuff, only the fraction of stuff really worked, and then they had to cobble it together. So that's why the cost of ERP implementations back in the day, and maybe still today, it was hundreds of millions of dollars in many of these organizations that I worked with, whether it was SAP or Oracle or something else in that time. Now, the web base and SaaS has made it better. So some of the activity metrics, if you will, and the overall implementation metrics have improved. So that's the good news. The costs have come down. So that's also great news. So now it's really about, can you really maximize the promise of that ROI and adoption? And that's what we're really talking about. So I think what you talked about in terms of getting leadership buy-in, having proper change management, better communication, getting quick wins, having a good well thought out plan is extremely critical. So I just wanted to emphasize that, but I also want to emphasize that it's not all doom and gloom, because I've seen worse in the past.
Absolutely. Shri, I see we have a question here that came in. In the current economic climate, how have HR performance metrics changed? I know a lot of organizations these days are feeling the financial crunch out there and looking for different things. And
yeah, I think the biggest, regardless of all the budget constraints and cost cutting and the layoffs we've had, we still have a massive talent shortage and a fight for talent regardless, because you do want to keep your best people. So a lot of the HR performance metrics have really become about improving their overall capabilities of their team members, whether it's skill improvement, skill development. Can people do new things that they were not able to do before because I can't find these people in the market? And that's one big thing. So skill improvement, skill development, getting more from the team they have, because the market pressures are not going away, right? The stockholders and the Wall Street and whoever is your investor, they still want to see improvement year over year, quarter over quarter. Even if you don't have the right number of people, the right skill set, you can't just go and hire people and increase your budget. So that part is one of the performance metrics that's improved. That also means now you need to make sure that you are retaining those people you're developing. So retention metrics have become an important aspect. And retention means a lot of things. You need to have a good process around learning and development and good engagement, because engagement directly impacts retention. A good culture where people want to work, they love to show up for work, they have good managers, the management skill sets have to be upskilled. So there are a lot of things that flow into that retention metric that people do care about.
Wow, that's great stuff. All right, well, I think we're just about out of time here. So I'd like to offer my thanks to everyone for joining us today. Shri, thank you so much for having me join you for this. I really appreciate the opportunity to partner with Engagedly. You've got a great team, and I would encourage everyone out there, if you're looking for an HRIT platform, check out Engagedly. It's a great team, it's a great platform, and a really great company to partner with. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Jason. It's been a pleasure.
All right, have a great day, everyone. Thank you.